Welcome to Recovery, the Enlightened Eating Disorder Podcast. I was told that I would have my eating disorder for life, but I called bullshit. In my teens and 20s, I was consumed by eating disorders, alcohol abuse, and substance addiction, at which point the professionals trying to help me sentenced me to life with my eating disorder, but I didn't buy into it. When I was finally ready to recover, I followed my intuition around the world and spent a decade studying, working, and training with doctors, spiritual leaders, and mentors in some of the most transformational and time-tested healing and awakening modalities known to humankind. These days, those who know me will tell you I'm totally and unequivocally eating disorder free. And the only thing I'm addicted to now is seeing just how deep this freedom actually goes. It's just not true that your eating disorder has to be a life sentence. Your very nature in this exact moment is already totally and completely free. This discovery changed everything for me. Not only did it help me rapidly heal from my eating disorder and substance abuse, it has taken me far, far beyond anything I could have ever imagined. And the best part is that it's not something I had to get from anyone. The key to freedom from disordered eating and so much more was already within me. And that's what this podcast is dedicated to, helping you realize that no matter what someone tells you, no matter how difficult your path has been, no matter how hopeless or broken you feel, no matter how much you may be fighting recovery in this very moment, you are, always were, and forever will be absolutely perfect and completely free. This is your birthright. So fuck recovery. You were born to thrive. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Fuck Recovery, the Enlightened Eating Disorder Podcast. I am so excited for this episode because today we are going to be joined by Haley Schiek, a new friend of mine and a colleague in the field of eating disorder recovery. Haley is an experienced yoga teacher as well as a certified eating disorder recovery coach. And today, Haley and I are going to be diving deep into the topic of vulnerability and eating disorder recovery. Haley and I met recently in an eating disorder recovery mentorship group that was being put on by the Yoga for Eating Disorders platform through Jennifer Creaziolius. And I was super impressed by Haley's eloquence, her level of embodied experience, and just the insight she brought to our bi-weekly calls. And we got connected for a coffee date and had this kind of mind-blowing conversation together. And we were like, hey, maybe we should do this more often. And we thought, why not record it? Why not have a podcast episode of hearing us talk about our recovery journey and the things that have helped support us most? So today I have invited Haley to come join the podcast. We're having kind of an open forum conversation, particularly around the topic of vulnerability and eating disorder recovery and why this is such an important piece to the recovery journey, not just the recovery journey, but after recovery as well, why vulnerability is a kind of superpower strength that you can develop towards living a life beyond recovery. So Haley just recently moved to Puerto Rico and I just recently moved to Guatemala. So the first part of the episode is Haley and I kind of catching up on each other's lives. Haley shares deeply and vulnerably about the grief process that she's in post-divorce. And I share also about my process moving into a new country and getting into a new place and feeling rooted here. And then we carry on into a conversation around vulnerability and what that's been like throughout our journey. And finally, at the very end of the episode, we wrap up by sharing some practical tips about how you can incorporate vulnerability into your recovery journey very, very simply and very practically. Haley is going to be joining me on several episodes going forward, and we would love to hear about topics in eating disorder recovery that you would like us to touch on. Also very, very welcoming of your questions, comments, anything that you would love to hear about on the podcast. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoy this episode. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Haley. Hey everyone, welcome back to Fuck Recovery, the Enlightened Eating Disorder Podcast. I am so stoked because today I am being joined by a new friend, but someone who I feel like have a super deep connection with already, and I'm very, very excited to have on this podcast. We were recently in an eating disorder mentorship group, and I was just super drawn to Haley and super inspired by some of the things that she said. So we ended up getting on some calls and saying, hey, maybe we want to be on the podcast. Haley, I would love for you to introduce yourself to listeners. We're hoping to make this kind of fireside chats style podcast a more regular feature on the podcast. So Haley, I would love for our listeners to get to know you and get to know who you are. If you want to share a bit about your background and what brought you here.
Thank you so much, Arin. I'm so excited to be a part of the first Fuck Recovery Fireside Chat. It is an honor to be here. And I am so grateful that we connected in this last year. It's been a treat to kind of share some viewpoints and experience and language about something that is still so central in my life, which I guess leads me into why this topic is central in my life, which is I'm an eating disorder recovery coach. I have over a decade of lived experience in eating disorder recovery myself, from anorexia, bulimia, the whole gamut. The pendulum swung so many times in my life for me wildly, and I definitely can still very vividly remember what it felt like to be in the throes of my ED and in the throes of recovery and how disorienting and exhausting that was. So I carry that lived experience close to me, but it's great because I'm in a place of life now where I don't identify as having an eating disorder. I get to feel really kind of like I'm taking that experience out of myself and looking at it with just some awareness. It doesn't feel so personal in a way that like really makes my life heavy. So I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful to get to do the one-on-one work that I do with other folks who are looking for additional support in recovery. So I am the owner of Kosana Coaching. That's where I do most of my work. And I started Kosana in 2021, just after really realizing corporate work isn't for me. I want something more emotional, but I don't want to be a therapist. It just was a shoe that didn't quite fit right, and felt like it would always give me a blister, like I'd be burned out or something. So I was really grateful to discover recovery coaching back in 2021. And that has led me onto this really cool path of yeah, getting to be a friend in other people's recovery and really fill in the gaps in care between the dietitians and the doctors and the therapists and all of that stuff. So I do one-on-one. I integrate yoga to help people come back to the body through chakra energy healing. I have a 7-week program. And then back when I lived in Charleston, I am now in Puerto Rico. But when I lived in Charleston, I taught surf lessons as well. And that was a really fun way to help people in recovery reconnect with pleasure at the beach, being present in the body instead of thinking about the body, building some confidence. And I really, really loved that. But that's, pause because the waves here are gnarly and I am not going to be an outsider coming to an island where I have no business teaching surf lessons. So for now, we do yoga.
Amazing. I'm so stoked for the wealth of both lived experience and just like depth of knowledge and depth of heart that you bring to the work that you do and to the conversations that we've had. And I'm really, really excited to see how this little experiment that we're doing is going to unfold and deepen. So thank you so much for being here, Haley. I am looking forward. Let's dive in.
Onward. So I wanted to hear about like if you were to give me like a 5-minute update of the month since I think we last chatted about life for you in Guatemala, what's like the rundown?
Wow. Okay. So much has happened in a month. I don't know if it's like this in Puerto Rico, but in Guatemala, like where we are, months, like a month feels like a year. There's so much happening. Um, I'm in my new house. I think maybe I shared with you on one of our last calls that my partner and I have been nomadic, sort of by choice, sort of by necessity for the last 2 years. And we haven't yet spent longer than 2 months in a single place in that period, which has been really beautiful and great learnings throughout that process. But now we're in this new place for 8 months. We're going to be in this place until December. So I'm kind of settling into it hasn't even really occurred. It hasn't like landed in my nervous system yet that we're going to be rooted here for that length of time. But we did move, and we're now in this place, and it's absolutely beautiful. Like this person who we got so lucky. This person who moved here like 7 years ago has been renovating this house. It's been a passion project for him. So it's like really thoughtful details and yeah, it's just a very nourishing space. At some point I'll like, give a tour, show folks where we're at. Um, and it feels really nice now to be, yeah, there is something about like arriving here and being a bit more stable, because when we came to Costa Rica, Guatemala, we came for this purpose of kind of engaging in a business venture with another person I'd known for 10 years, and that didn't work out. And the last time you and I spoke, actually, you held a lot of space for me because that was a very difficult transition. It was, yeah, I'm still framing like the story component of what happened, but ultimately, um, the woman and myself and my husband, like we had different communication styles, and um, it was a very triggering experience for me. I'll just share that piece, and it like reactivated a lot of different fears and insecurities, and that started bleeding over into like other areas of my life. Like I noticed I was getting angry and snappy with my partner, and like self-doubt was bubbling up and like emerging within me. So much self-doubt that I was like, I don't know if I can trust myself. And throughout my journey, building trust with myself has been such a big deal, that to have that kind of undermined through this way, like no hard feelings truly to this woman. Um, I genuinely hope that like her business works out and that she is living a fabulous life where she is. And yeah, my sincere hope is that she's happy. But the way that like just the karma came together was very triggering for me. So when you and I last spoke, I was in the middle of that trigger and was in the middle of this place where I felt like I literally couldn't trust myself. Like even things like, this is not a true example, but I can't think of a true example, so this is like somewhat arbitrary, but even things like, should I have should I drink this water right now? Or like, should I say this thing to this person? Like I was questioning every little thing I was doing. So we moved out of that place. We moved into a place like just behind it. It came available literally like the day somebody showed up to take over for us. So it was very synchronistic in this way. We spent a month there, and it was really like a transition period. Like we just were kind of working the last bits of this situation out of our system in a sense. Um, so yeah, the big update for me has been like just the physical relocation and settling into a place that truly feels very peaceful and like feel very aligned with the owner of this house, and communication so far has been so great. And just like doing the intentional healing work of noticing how that last interaction has impacted me. Like now I notice in conversations and things like new awarenesses of things people say or how they say them, and noticing I have like a guard up within me. So like now it's this process of unfolding in this new space over these 8 months, like allowing my heart to, open in whatever ways it wanted to close. And I think that's really the big update. It's like the only thing that's super top of mind at the moment.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
That's all. Cool.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, well, congratulations on being settled in a new space and for gripping the floor for long enough to get through your trigger.
Thank you. How's it been going in Puerto Rico? You were also in a major, like, well, you were settling into a new flow. It sounded like. What's happening now? What's happened in the last month since we've connected?
Yeah, I think when we last connected, I was really flowing, like kind kind of really just enjoying the feeling of alignment, in a way that I don't think I have felt in years, if ever, like as an adult, for sure, as an adult, like it was just so much alignment. And so I was really enjoying that and feeling that momentum. Um, and then as is life, especially as a woman being a cyclical being, like that luteal phase plane crash of March, man, it was tough because it actually coincided with my now ex-husband's birthday, and I received I don't think a lot of people know this, but I decided to end my marriage a few weeks after moving with him to Puerto Rico. So that's a whole other story for a totally different day. But I've been in the process of, doing the papers and the filing, and I had taken care of that at the end of February, which was very emotional and challenging and kind of like distracting from being able to build forward. But that's just part of it. You got to sit with what you're still trying to, like the mess you're kind of still cleaning up. Can't rush it. But I thought I was done with the process and kind of like dealt with that wave of grief, blah, blah, blah. And then I get the papers back in the mail and they've been rejected by the court because there's a missing form. So, girl, I'm telling you, it took me a full week of having these papers back on my counter to be willing to even like look at why they were rejected. And then when I finally was willing to fill out the form, which honestly, I'm proud of myself that it only took a week this time, because the first time filling out the papers, it took me a month of having them in my home to be able to like confront the pain of having to sign that decision into like legal finality. It hurt so much. Like this grief has like, I'm trying really hard to not let the grief of this transition absolutely pummel me. But I mean, like even yesterday morning for the first hour of the day, I just like bawled and like imagine myself surfing, like sitting on my surfboard, watching my emotions as waves coming towards me, sometimes failing a duck dive and getting clocked in the face by a wave of like sadness or longing or nostalgia, or just some random thought about it, but that's the process. But this time around, it didn't take me a month to sign the papers again and send them and get them in the mail. It took me a week. And I will say, since doing that and since like passing his birthday, like I'm actually feeling more grief than I was for a little while, but I'm also feeling more graceful in the grief. Like it hurts in a way that is serving me. So that's like kind of like the heaviest thing that I feel like has been on my heart. Obviously, I guess that's why it just came out first. But when I'm able to set like the heaviness of that part of my reality down, like I'm freaking getting to teach yoga on this most beautiful beach ever. Like the beach, Playa Hobos, that my heart somehow knew about and called me to 3 years ago. And now I'm like here teaching yoga at the same hotel that I came and visited to scope out if, I could maybe make this work, make moving to Puerto Rico a reality. So to be teaching in that place, to have, like it's all just beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, a lot of synchronicities over on this island as well.
Wow, amazing. I just want to I'm feeling inspired by your courage. Like I said this to you last time when you shared, or the first time we spoke, when you shared with me about this decision that you had made about stepping into alignment, like truly stepping into alignment with what was true for you and the sacrifice that you were willing to make in the name of that was so powerful. Even talking about it now, I still feel that kind of electricity of like, wow, that's really, it touches something so deep within me that you were willing to do that. And still in this moment, hearing it again for the second time is a serious inspiration. So just acknowledging that so fully. And also wanted to acknowledge, yeah, man, yeah. I think I said to you on the first call, like, I can't imagine myself doing that or like making a decision like that, like just knowing how difficult it is. You moved your whole life with your partner to this new place. And then a week in, you were like, wow, this is so unaligned within me. I have to do something different, you know? And I just, yeah.
Well, and I think like to segue into our topic for the day, vulnerability and eating disorder recovery, it's like this is the most vulnerable I feel like I have felt in a really long time, just like in general in my life. So I'm really freaking grateful for all the work I did in recovery for a decade to be able to be tolerating this level of like completely necessary vulnerability. Like, if I were not willing to be vulnerable, which for me means being willing to be authentic in front of someone else, potentially be witnessed or seen, and also potentially risk rejection, disconnection, embarrassment, judgment, all of it. Like, that's the package of vulnerability. If I'm not willing to be vulnerable, I'm never going to learn Spanish. Do you think that I'm going to have the kind of experience that I want to have here if I only speak English? No. But Haley in college, like, freshman, really perfectionistic, really terrified of other people judging her, wanting to do anything to prevent even the opportunity for someone to judge her. So, of course, adhere to the thin ideal, number one. Biggest shield is having the body type that is exalted in our culture.
Yeah.
So that was a shield for vulnerability, trying to maintain that thin ideal. But then like striving for perfect days and, all of those things. It's all of these shields of perfection, of I'm not human, I'm not making mistakes. No, to learn a language, you have to say the stupidest thing with complete and full confidence mid-conversation publicly, sometimes with a stranger.
Yes. And the break in rapport that comes along with that. Like, but the thing is, this occurred to me yesterday because I think a big part of vulnerability as well, like, of course, it means being willing to be that way with others, but there's such a big component, at least there was for me on my journey, of what it meant to truly be honest with myself. Like, I had bought into so many different beliefs and lies basically about myself as a self-protective mechanism, like not being able to be honest with myself in order to maintain a certain, self-image that I thought would be socially acceptable, that would get me the love from my parents, etc. So this notion of being honest with myself, like that in a way has been a saving grace in the journey of vulnerability, because this step that you're talking about doing this with other people, it's super powerful and super healing, because when you can be vulnerable and be witnessed by other people and to have them like accept you and acknowledge you, even when they don't accept you and acknowledge you, like to unburden yourself by putting that dirty laundry, and not even dirty laundry, in the air, but like to unburden yourself by speaking your truth into the world, suddenly it becomes lighter. But the thing I noticed yesterday is that I feel like you get to a point with self-honesty and with vulnerability that even the crunchiness, even the feelings of like, nervousness, embarrassment, rejection, shame, you get to a point where the feeling of aligning with your truth actually feels so good in a way that there's a way that those things actually start to feel good in a way, because it's an indication that you're aligning with your truth. Like, I'm speaking my truth and I'm speaking what's real and authentic for me. And no matter what comes back, it's like, it's just energy coming back to meet that truth. And there's something about that that actually ends up feeling really, really good. And I think it took me a while to get to that point, to like be able to focus more on the fact of like creating this space within myself and the lightness within myself, that being honest and being vulnerable with people, what that like what that could mean for me. But yeah, I'm mainly just saying this, like, I don't want people to get discouraged in the thought that like it's all bad, it's all hard. Like, there's actually some really um nice, pleasurable, enjoyable aspects about being vulnerable, and it kind of builds a momentum as well. Like, the more you are capable of doing it with yourself, the more freeing and alive and light, etc. it feels.
Well, to bring it back to what you were saying was something that when you were triggered, it was the first thing to go. It was the self-trust. And we receive more trust in ourselves when we are vulnerable with ourselves through self-honesty, and through when we are honest and authentic with others. So as we practice vulnerability, self-honesty, and honesty with others, right, we then trust ourselves more to reach out when needed, to face the music, to not avoid serious problems, to have our own back. Like that's how you build self-trust. So there's a lot of reasons that vulnerability is important, right? Like for me in my life right now, it's like without it, I'm not going to learn a new skill and I'm not going to have a fulfilling experience. Like my experience is going to be much more limited and small if I'm unwilling to be vulnerable right now. For you, you're getting to be more aligned with like an authentic and true reality and like live from a place of confidence and self-trust. And those are just two examples of reasons like why being vulnerable is so useful. And I don't know if that in some people's minds like is specific enough to like why being vulnerable in ED recovery, like if they completely see the ties, but for me and the tie is that you're not in recovery forever. And yes, you might be in recovery right now, and it might feel like your whole life is saturated with like recovering from this eating disorder. But there's actually a whole life and a whole person beyond the ED, like present right now, whether you're choosing to be with them or identify with them or see them or honor them or not, like they're here. And so I feel like when we talk about these examples of vulnerability benefiting our lives, it's all the same. Because we are just now in a place of recovery where like, yeah, we might get triggered and we might experience new levels of understanding and depth of awareness within ourselves, but it's so different than previous evolutions of like being confronted with like so much insurmountable need to be vulnerable. And I think part of vulnerability, right, for us is just being faced with so much unknown and change and having so little control. Like that's a really vulnerable position to be in. But it's one that when you do the little tangible things of recovery over time, like you can tolerate that. Like I couldn't have moved to this island, like I said, back as a freshman in college. I did not have the practice and the skills to treat myself with enough kindness and grace to like thrive here. I didn't know how, but now I have the self-compassion and like the willingness to be embarrassed and be vulnerable and like risk all of those things. And so like it's all for me, it's like life and recovery, like they're just one and the same. And I just wanted to kind of tease that point out a little bit further.
There's some things that are emerging too that I feel like would be interesting and useful to put on the table when it comes to the conversation of vulnerability. One is kind of circling back to the beginning of the conversation, like what really is vulnerability? What does that look like? How is it practiced? How is it practical? Like what are ways that we can, make it practical? And I think this is in an effort to kind of build that link between, eating disorder recovery and why vulnerability is important. Well, what is it, first of all? And you mentioned earlier, like it's the ability to be, honest with someone in the face of not wanting to, for example, but to really honor what is true and real for you. And then I entered, I think there's a level of self-honesty, like being willing to face yourself and ask the question, like, what is really true for me? And to be able to sit with whatever the answer is. Maybe there's no answer even, and that's vulnerable, like being able to sit with the fact that I don't know. And for me, at least in my journey, there was a long period of I don't know. There still is. And being able to lean into that I don't know, I think that's also a big component of it. You leave yourself open, right, to not knowing the answer. And that in our conventional world seems so counterintuitive to what is like healthy and good and purposeful and focused and productive and da 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 da, all these things that we're supposed to be, that our culture has kind of constructed as the right way to be in society. But the reality is, like, being in a state of not knowing in a way is ultimately vulnerable because you are so open to the possibilities, to what could be, even just to say I don't know in a conversation with someone takes so much courage. Courage is kind of like the bedfellow of vulnerability, I think, or maybe there's a better word. It's more like the fuel for vulnerability. Um, and then the last piece. So the last piece is like there's a serious strength. So like creating this intention or this motivation to like, utilize vulnerability as a tool or as a path in eating disorder recovery, there's an amazing amount of strength that comes. And you were talking about this earlier, like there's an amazing amount of strength and resource, inner resource, that comes from being willing to sit with what's true for you. And I think it's also important to enter into this conversation that it's always going to shift and it's constantly shifting. Like sometimes what's true for me is I feel really ashamed and really embarrassed of something that I said or did. But actually, like that's going to shift. A week later with some perspective and some reflection, I might actually see like, wow, I did a really powerful thing by setting that boundary for myself. Even though I felt totally ashamed, like I was doing something wrong when I did it, I actually feel really empowered by it. So this notion that like what is true for you in the moment is going to shift and it is going to change. And there's a tremendous power and strength that we can cultivate within ourselves, this kind of fortitude in a way and resilience of being willing to be with what is moment to moment to moment, knowing that it's going to change. And this is like, a huge thing I had to overcome, and I'm still, working on overcoming, which is, some of these cognitive distortions that like are so common in eating disorder recovery. And one of them being like the apocalyptic thinking of like, this is always going to be this way. I set this boundary and I'm always going to feel ashamed of this boundary. I'm always going to feel embarrassed of this boundary. But it's actually a much more fluid and flexible process, this notion of vulnerability. And in a way, it's like the image that comes to mind is like being a friend with yourself, like if you were your own like closest confidant and just developing that relationship of being able to ask yourself these authentic questions and be willing to like be with the answer as it emerges.
It's interesting you bring that up. I'm actually really glad because that brings me back to a previous point you made about how good it feels when people accept you, when you take that risk and you are vulnerable. But also how it's true. Sometimes you're vulnerable and people respond in a way where it feels like you maybe were an egg hoping to get dropped in a nice soft basket and you splatted on the floor, like no one got you. But for me, like the truth that I have grown into and cultivated through practice and like repetition is that the reality is I can only control how I respond to me. So the vulnerability has to be to serve myself. And I have to plan how I'll respond to me being vulnerable. So am I going to punish myself for being vulnerable and setting a boundary? Because doing that is like overriding some previous programming about me not, I shouldn't take up space. So I'm encountering guilt because I'm overstepping that previous belief. No, like vulnerability is, oh no, I lost my train of thought there. Where did it go?
That's super vulnerable to like totally own that.
No, it happens. And today, especially, I mean, the general gist of my life right now is things are a little crazy. Like things are just busy. I have so much cognitive fatigue. Like I'm working 7 days a week and that's okay. Like that's this phase of life, right? Like I am newly on my own. I'm used to having dual income. However, I also graduated into the pandemic. So this is just a harder financial time for someone in my demographic. So yeah, I'm working every day. And I know that this time will not last forever, but in the meantime, I am exhausted. And so yeah, I lose my train of thought sometimes. And again, only focusing on what I can control, how I respond to myself when I make a mistake. Making a mistake, forgetting your train of thought, it's vulnerable. You might look a little silly. Maybe someone will judge you, but that's not my business. I can't control that. I can't do anything with it. All I can focus on is how I'll respond to me. And for me, I'm just going to kind of like, glance over in the mirror. We're going to do a little smile, a little giggle at each other. Girl, you lost your train of thought. You need a nap. And we move on. So I feel like for me, it's really fun to see the relationship I have developed with myself. And it's been more clear single. Like I've been able to see myself more clearly and unpack my relationship with myself and start to really heal some wounds in it. Um, and it's fun. Like I'm having a good time getting to know myself on this level. So I feel like I'm in a new level of recovery, and it's less to do with an ED, because I don't identify as having an ED anymore. I feel like I've faced that challenge, and I'm really grateful to be where I am. But I'm still recovering a healthy relationship with myself, always and forever. And like I'm still recovering trust after so many years of self-abuse to cope with my human experience. Like it's a process, but I feel like for the first time in my life, I'm like really present with the process, um, in a way that is just kind of fun. So there's a lightness to the fatigue and the heaviness and the shifts and the vulnerability. It's like what you said, there's a lightness. So for me, getting to connect with that lightness and feel that spaciousness and relief after a big wave of grief, after making a mistake, after the constriction, the heaviness, the like, oh, and being able to breathe again, it's making the roller coaster well worth the ride. I'll say that much.
I couldn't have said it better, and I fully have goosebumps because this is the essence, I think, of what vulnerability. I mean, along with a slew of other tools to help like cultivate and practice and develop that self relationship, but this is the essence of what I think vulnerability really makes possible, which is fully living your life. Because vulnerability, in a way, is like this semi-permeable membrane where you're allowing yourself to be met by life, and you're allowing yourself to meet life, like whatever emotional experience, mood, thought, whatever is emerging within you, a willingness to be with it fully, and to allow it. And actually, like, obviously, it's very common and very automatic to put up boundaries and walls to some of these experiences you describe, like, for example, like fatigue, like, so many strategies to navigate that. Like we can kick into the kind of doer mode where we're just kind of pushing our fatigue to the background, or um, you know, we can be cruel to ourselves of like, oh, I know better, especially if we're walking, a path of self-development, and we know how important, like, well, self-development, recovery, we know how important rest is, so like it's easy to, be hard on ourselves with that. But like truly allowing yourself to see where you are in the moment, to inhabit that kind of mode of being for that time, with this knowing that like it's going to shift, it's going to change, this isn't going to be forever. It allows you to really be with life so much more fully, which I think ultimately has this effect of making life much more of a simple enjoyment. Like you don't need all of the bells and whistles, all of the like peak experiences, all of the, I mean, it's super nice to treat yourself and give yourself things that give you joy fully, 100%. We'll talk, I'm sure, a lot about that on this podcast. But, but it, in a way, it creates this way of experiencing life where you don't need as much, because life itself is so fulfilling. Like the experience of every moment gets to be so fulfilling. The like, embarrassment and the annoyance and the frustration and the guilt and the grief. You're like, wow, there's such like depth and richness to this. And yeah, it feels uncomfortable, but I know I'm okay. And I know it's gonna change.
What it goes back to like what you were saying earlier, Arin, about how vulnerable it is to be in a state of openness and not knowing and understanding that everything's changing and your truth is changing. And sometimes the truth isn't changing, but how you feel about it's changing. So at the end of the day, there's just so much change. And so there's so much unknown. And so there's so much vulnerability. But I think the beauty of practicing vulnerability is that over time it becomes the one that's easier. Like it becomes the path that's more well walked. And so in those moments where you're faced with kind of a decision, like, do I betray myself and do I not speak my need and do I not speak my truth and do I lie and say I'm comfortable when I'm not? When you're faced with that moment, you've walked your path of self-honesty so many times, and of speaking your truth, and of speaking it out loud, and of disappointing other people, and acting in a way that you understand that boundaries are your job and no one else's, period. That just becomes default mode. So when people ask, I think a common Q&A in recovery is like, does it get easier? And when? And for me, there's a lot of answers to that question. One of them is yes, absolutely, without a doubt, it gets easier.
100%.
And for me, at least, got a lot easier when I was willing to be fully human, fully messy, fully judgeable, fully unlikable, fully whatever, all of it. Fallible, best intentions, still have a bad impact, all of it. That was when recovery got easier, because being rooted in those uncomfortable truths about what it means to be a human made it really freaking easy to just simply do it. And that for me is the essence of being vulnerable.
Fully. Yeah, for that it was similar for me, and it showed up as honestly giving less fucks about trying to maintain all of the facades, all of the perfections, all of the everything, just allowing myself to be what was. I'm mindful of the time. We got going a little bit late. But one thing I want to make sure to include in this, because I think it's such a rich topic, and there's like a wealth of how it has impacted and shown up in our individual journeys. And I hope some of that has translated and come across, and that there's some things, folks can take away from this. But one thing I would love to anchor this in is some type of practical, like, step. How can it be implemented? How can vulnerability, like if someone were to shut this podcast off and take one thing away from this podcast, maybe it's like a tiny little practice that they can do to be vulnerable. I'd love to hear what you would offer someone.
I love that invitation. The first thing that's coming to my mind is if you go to a restaurant and someone asks you if you like your food and you don't, be vulnerable. And don't freaking lie to them. Don't tell them the food is good. You're paying for that. Be honest.
Yes. Yes. Love it.
You don't have to be rude. Just be honest.
Yeah. A simple no. A simple no. And this is the thing, like here, maybe this will be my tip for vulnerability, for the practice of vulnerability. So in this context, like when you go to a restaurant and someone asks you, do you like your food? And you are really tuning in to like what is true for you. Start with what's simple. Over time, you'll be able to communicate with much more clarity and verboseness and nuance, like what is really true and authentic for you. But being vulnerable can really lock up our nervous system. Like when I'm on the edge of something that makes me uncomfortable and I really want to speak my truth, like I can start to feel like, gripping in my chest and my throat, and it can be really difficult to express the fullness of what I'm feeling. So my like practice would be start with something simple. Like a seriously just yes or no would be enough. In this instance, like do you like your food? Rather than saying like no, but it's da 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 da, or like these are the things I like about it, but da da da. If it's a no, just let it be a no. And if it's a yes, let it be a yes. And if you haven't tried your food, I haven't tried my food. Like simple. Simple will help. It will help you get into the rhythm and the pattern of like coming into these moments where it's time to like tune in and see what's true for you and then offer that back to the world. Keeping it simple will help you take that step, and taking that step over and over and over again helps you build that muscle.
Beautiful. I love that. Bringing you back to a simple practice.
Yes. This was what I needed so much of on the journey of recovery. Yeah, just make it practical, make it simple. Tell me what to do. I want to do it,
Well, and on the note of practical, this is well timed because I actually have a Finding Your Groove in ED recovery group coaching program starting next week with Yoga for Eating Disorders. Our friend Jen So every week that will include psychoeducation on topics that are super useful to recovery, like body image and the psychology of social media, unpacking fat phobia and diet culture and figuring out how to like spot those more easily. And even stuff like overcoming perfectionism and people pleasing. So you have more energy for your life and just can experience some more self-trust and satisfaction like we were talking about today. So that starts next Wednesday, April 9th. So that's coming up really fast. But every single session will include tangible integration activities that you can practice on your own to help make recovery really clear. Just let's simplify this whole thing.
Amazing. Want to end also by just creating an invitation for folks. Anyone who has questions, we have devoted a section of this podcast to answering your questions. We want to know how it's going for you, what would support you, where do you need clarity, where do you need, just some holding, some witnessing. So we really want to invite folks, of course, on topics related to eating disorders, topics related to recovery, but also if this podcast resonates with you and you feel like there's something that, you want to raise with us, feel free to send in your questions about anything. We're really wanting this to be an interactive process that's really serving folks, not just us talking into nothing. So with that, Haley, thank you so much. I'm super stoked. I think for our first podcast, this was super fun. And I'm excited to see where it goes. And I hope it's really supportive and valuable and beneficial for anyone who's out there listening to it.
Likewise. So thank you for anyone who tuned in. And yeah, like Arin said, we would love to hear what resonated with you, what tangible things you're doing to integrate vulnerability into your recovery. We'd love to know. And yeah, connect with us. I know I'm on Instagram as Kosana Coaching, COSANA Coaching. And if you have any questions for me, you're welcome to email info@kosanacoaching.com. And yeah, now we're on the pod, friends of the pod.
Yes.
So you'll be finding me here on some fireside chats as well. So stay tuned.
Amazing. As Haley mentioned, you can find us both on Instagram. We'll make sure that all of the handles and all the details are in the show notes. I'm also taking one-on-one clients for yoga therapy as well as coaching ongoing for folks with eating disorders in recovery, particularly those folks who are looking to move beyond that kind of last stage of recovery where you're kind of in the phase of I feel like I'm kind of there, but I'm not yet fully birthed into my new self, my new life yet. If you're feeling like you would want some support, basically breaking out of the shell, breaking out of the seed, breaking out of the mold that you've been in for a while, please reach out. I will add all of the contact details for both Haley and I in the show notes. And yeah, we'll be together here hopefully pretty regularly.
It was so nice chatting with you.
Likewise, Haley, thank you so much. And to all of our listeners out there, if you are feeling for any reason, fuck recovery. Maybe it's hard. Maybe you're just over it. Maybe you've been in the throes of it for decades and you're like, I'm just so ready to get over this. If you're feeling like fuck recovery, please reach out to one of us or both of us. We are here to listen, to witness you, to support you, to love you. And yeah, fuck recovery. Because you were born for so much more than just this chapter. 3, 2, 1. Fuck recovery.